Welcome to Veterans Archives, where your story matters. We are dedicated to preserving the stories of our nation's heroes for future generations. Today is Sunday, March 9th. We're talking with Brad Budzynski, who served in the United States Marine Corps. So good morning, Brad, and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Good to have you here. We're going to start out like we always do, pretty simple.
Okay.
When and where were you born?
I was born July 17th, 1981 in Lansing, Michigan.
All right. I graduated high school in 1983.
Did you?
You guys make me feel old every time I do one of these.
I get it. I know the feeling.
Yeah, it's like when you see, if you're 21 on this date, you can drink, and it's like the date you graduated high school or whatever.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I experienced that all the time when I worked in the prison. I'd look at IDs and just be like, "Oh man, you're 20 years old.
Yeah, you're a baby.
You're a baby, and your life's ruined."
Yeah, exactly. So did you grow up in Lansing then?
Well, Hazlitt.
Hazlitt.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Born at St. Lawrence Hospital. Grew up in Hazlitt. Lived throughout mid-Michigan my whole life, minus the military.
Uh-huh.
So.
Okay. So tell me, what was it like growing up, Brad, in Hazlitt?
Smaller town. One sister, 2 years younger.
Uh-huh.
Parents married happily, and yeah, my mom worked at a few different jobs, and she works in for the township, a local township now, and my dad was a taxidermist and self-employed and landscaping. He passed a couple years ago. So yeah, I worked with my dad a lot because through the landscaping business, I wasn't really attracted to the taxidermy. I supported him and went to different shows, and he was accomplished, renowned, won state, national, and world taxidermy competitions and did seminars and all that. It just wasn't my cup of tea, but I did help him with landscaping, so I grew up doing that, mowing lawns, plowing snow. I tried some different sports, wasn't really great at anything in particular, but I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed physical fitness, and I did some martial arts. I actually practiced with the wrestling team my senior year just to get in shape for boot camp. I worked. I bought my own first truck when I was in high school. My parents co-signed for a loan. I met my wife in high school, and we've been married since 2002.
Oh, so you're like this is like the American dream. Like when you read a book or watch a movie, this is what it's supposed to be like.
I don't know about that. No one's life is perfect.
Right.
But you know what? I'm very thankful for the life I have and have had, and I think military service is really good at making you reflect on that.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that a little bit. One is that I get the sense, like my dad worked in the factory, but the guy worked 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. And I got that sort of work ethic from my dad.
Sure.
My kids have the same damn work ethic, and sometimes they work so hard they make themselves sick. But it was just one of those things that was kind of handed down. So in the military, hard work wasn't really, that wasn't that scary to me because I'd done it. And so it sounds like it's very similar for you. So you go through school, you graduate. So what happens after graduation?
So I signed up for the delayed entry program for the Marine Corps my junior year. I knew what I wanted to do. I think I knew what I wanted to do pretty young. I didn't know for sure if it would be Air Force, being a pilot. But as I got closer to that date and graduation, the drumbeat continued, and I knew I wanted to serve in a combat role on the ground. So I just went infantry. And I know it's not, the most attractive job to a lot of people, but it's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be on the ground and serve my country.
Well, and, I was a recruiter. I'm going to ask this question anyway, but as a recruiter, I remember anytime someone came into my office, if they wanted to be in the Marine Corps, there was no changing that that like a Marine wants to be a Marine no matter what.
They get stuck in their head.
Yeah. Was that kind of you? Like, I'm going to be a Marine. I'm not,
I think after, like I said, after considering some different branches and looking at them, it just spoke to me. I felt like it was like a gravitational pull, like I was destined to do that. I mean, simply put, for a lot of reasons. Uniforms are pretty nice too.
Yeah, those guys look damn good in their uniforms.
I mean,
no lie.
You can't deny all those commercials growing up.
No, not at all.
But that's not what sold me.
Yeah. It's just a bonus, right?
It's a bonus, yeah.
Absolutely. So, how long were you in delayed entry?
For a year.
Okay, that's a long time.
It was. So I did the whole once a week, every Thursday, I think it was. We'd get together, have a 2-hour, I think it was, play a pickup game of some sport, go for a moto run, go play paintball, learn rank structure, marching, practice push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, history. And I think it gave me a definite advantage, so I'm glad I did that. I'd highly recommend it to any person thinking about the military because it gives you that little leg up. You're not going to know everything, but if you have a little grasp on the history and the rank structure, when you're getting yelled at and tortured, sometimes you can get out of that a little quicker if you know the answer.
Right.
So,
and you're not the guy that steps off the bus with like a deer in the headlights either, because you kind of know what to expect.
You kind of know what to expect, yeah. And it was fun, and it helped, motivate you to stay in shape, and you're getting to know some guys and girls that are in the same scenario. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of that cohesiveness, that brother sisterhood already. So I did that, and I didn't realize till I was in that 1 year of delayed entry would count towards one last year of my total enlistment. So
yeah.
I did my 4 years active duty, and instead of serving 4 years inactive, I only had to do 3. So there's definitely a benefit before going in and post-service.
Yep, absolutely.
So,
now, the downside for the recruiter is sometimes people don't go, but clearly that was not you.
Yeah, well, sometimes people sign up and go, and then they still skip boot camp or go AWOL.
Oh, that's true. That's true. It's funny you say that. So I took my boot camp in San Diego back when the Navy still had boot camp out there.
I was in San Diego as well.
Yeah. So back in the day, the Navy boot camp and the Marine Corps boot camp butted up against each other, and there's this fence, and you could see the Marines, and they were working their butts off. But I remember one night this kid decides he's done, so he's going to go AWOL. So he jumps the fence thinking he's going AWOL, but he jumps the fence into Marine Corps boot camp.
Oh, that's...
Well, they kept him for like 2 weeks, and when they brought him back, he was more than happy to be in the Navy. I'll just say that. So you took your boot camp in San Diego. Let's talk a little bit about that trip to San Diego, and then what's it like stepping off that bus into Marine Corps boot camp?
Sure, it's all that you expect. Watch Jarhead, watch Full Metal Jacket. It's pretty similar. Mm-hmm. A lot of screaming. It's even though it's United States, you get an element of culture shock. You're 17, 18, 19 years old, getting on a plane, flying cross country to a place I've never been, which, it's still the U.S., but, you're thrown into this melting pot with, in my case, in the Marine Corps, it's male-only boot camp. They're separated. And I was in a job that was male-only. So I'll refer to just males pretty much when I talk about this. So boot camp, going across country and all that journey, it's time to grow up. There's a lot of reflection, and I was good with that, but it was my journey, and I embraced it. You meet people from all different backgrounds, religions, ethnicities from the get-go, right? From the moment you get on that bus, you're starting to look around, you don't know anybody. It can be a very isolating, kind of lonely experience, but you're all in that together, and the more and more you're together, you become one cohesive unit. So it's a really neat process.
Yeah.
And I laugh at job interviews when they say, tell us how you work with other people. And diversity. And I just laugh, and I always just keep it short and simple, and I go to that same response with boot camp. Mm-hmm. You're thrown into a melting pot with people from all over the country, sometimes the world, and then next thing you know, you're one synchronized fighting machine. So that's, in a nutshell, like how cool I think that whole process is. And overall, that's, you come in, all different haircuts, clothing styles, and you leave marching together, all looking the same.
Right. Well, and I like to say that the military was diverse before diversity was cool.
Absolutely.
Right. They've been doing it for a long time, a lot longer than some other places. And I think they do it right, in all honesty.
They do, and it's all for a reason.
Yeah.
Quite honestly, as far as like hazing, I think, my personal opinion, within reason, and if it's applicable to the combat role or your job, I mean, let's just face it, we're training for a war, and we're not training to bake a cake.
Right.
So, I mean, especially combat-related roles, I think we should kind of allow to a point and let the branches do what they do.
Yeah.
Well,
I think that there's an old saying that you have rough people standing to do the things that you don't want to do so that you can sleep comfortably in your bed. And that's what
I love that quote.
Yeah. I mean, the military is there to break things and kill people.
Yes.
Not to deliver pizzas. And that's an important distinction that we have to make. And,
absolutely.
Being a combat veteran yourself, that's how it works.
Yeah. And is it pleasant? Are the stories always nice to hear? Absolutely not.
No.
I don't even consider myself that much of a war veteran. I was in combat. I got the ribbon. But even, I reflect back to other wars, right? World War II, Vietnam. I mean, these guys storming the beaches of Normandy, and I just laugh kind of at what I did. Several firefights, and we had some guys die and get injured. But even my junior Marines that deployed when I got out, the deployment I was on, the first initial invasion in Iraq, it wasn't, I mean, there's a lot of elements that sucked, but it wasn't all-out combat nonstop, where my junior Marines that went back and deployed, a lot of guys died. A lot of guys got hurt, and they even tell us it was totally different. So with that being said, I'm just grateful for anybody that wears a uniform, period. We all sign up, sign the blank check, and anything's possible. And you could be during peacetime, it could be during wartime. We can't control what conflict we're sent to. But I just have nothing but gratitude for the fellow vets, and that's kind of where I stand on that. So
yeah, no, I'm with you.
Yeah.
So let's do. So you go to boot camp. I think that's a really great description of what happens there. After boot camp, did you go to? Is it IRT that you go to after boot camp?
So the first phase of Marine boot camp in San Diego is at MCRD, and that's kind of unique because MCRD, Marine Recruit Depot. Yeah, that's right next to the San Diego airport. And if you ever flew into San Diego, you'll see the boot camp, the rappel wall, the obstacle course, all that. You'll see Marines getting hazed, right? So that's always a weird feeling, right when you're flying into boot camp, you look out and you see these guys thinking, oh, shit, that's me.
That's by design,
yeah,
Brad.
Yeah. And another thing I realize about this, by design, you're right by an airport. You're hearing thunderous planes take off, loud noises constantly. You feel the barracks shake a lot. It's all concrete. So it's all part of the plan, right?
Yeah.
And it's also kind of messed up because you're watching these planes every night thinking, oh, I kind of like to be on that plane right now, going home,
Right.
And that was actually my trick for my final PFT, my run. I never got to a perfect 18 minutes. But I tried so hard. I got to 18:10, and for 3 miles, and I did that by training, but also by watching these planes thinking, oh, I could be on this plane right now, going somewhere tropical or going home, and just kind of took my mind off the running. And so I kind of use it for a benefit sometimes too.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. It's not about perfection. It's about improvement.
Yes. Yes. So the first portion of boot camp was at MCRD, and then they bus you up to Camp Pendleton. Because MCRD is, all barracks and garrison stuff, marching. Then you go up to Camp Pendleton, and that's your firearms, field training, land nav, all that kind of stuff. You finish out, most of the boot camp there, then you come back for a couple weeks or whatever and graduate. And then from there, I think I had leave right after boot camp, and then for a week, and then I flew out back to Camp Pendleton to SOI, School of Infantry. So boot camp was 12 weeks, and then School of Infantry, I believe, was 7. And then I got to the fleet.
Mm-hmm.
Was at Camp Pendleton. Now, on my wish sheet with the recruiter, you had 3 choices for duty stations, and I wanted to go cross country somewhere different, so I put California, Hawaii, and I got California, which I was happy. A lot of guys didn't get what they requested.
No, a lot of guys say California, Hawaii, and they end up in Alaska or something like that.
Yeah.
So, very fortunate.
Or somewhere right by their hometown, or they're from California and they get stationed at. It's like, you sign up in the military and you get stationed in your home state.
Right. Join the military and see your home state.
Yeah.
So where were you at in California then?
So Camp Mateo and Camp Pendleton, 2-5, 2nd Battalion, 5th Marine Regiment, 1st Marine Division. 2-5 is an infantry unit. It's actually the most decorated battalion in the Marine Corps. If it is still now, I'm pretty sure, but I'd have to look. There's been a lot of combat deployments lately, so it's talking about making you feel old. My buddy went back to base with his kids last year, and there's brand new barracks. The whole camp's changed. There's these huge war monuments that weren't there when I was, which obviously a lot's happened. And to see buddies' names on the fallen wall, ironically, I plan to take a family vacation soon and take them out there.
Yeah.
I think that's another very important thing I'd like to do, just like this podcast, kind of documenting something for them, to pass down, right?
Yeah.
To their kids. And I think part of the trip, you can talk about it all you want with family and friends, but to take them there and kind of show them and experience a little bit, I think that's special. It lets them taste a little more of the reality you lived. And it's just like I went to D.C. as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot more respect for that place now. I'd love to go back. I think just like if we would have took our kids on that trip where I was stationed when they were real young, the appreciation wouldn't be there.
Right.
So
it's like there's an age where they're gonna get it, and they're gonna understand the importance of what happened. I think there's power in seeing it too. I know. I visited the Arizona Memorial, and we talked about it. And I've read books about it. You've seen all the shows on TV.
Yeah.
And you're heading out there, and you get there, and you're like, oh, cool, we're gonna go see the Arizona Memorial. You get on that memorial, there's not a dry eye there. The biggest stuff is guys, they're all crying because it's real.
It
is.
You
can see it.
And sometimes you're overtaken by that, right?
Yeah.
You probably don't even expect that's going to happen.
No.
And quite honestly, I'm not very sensitive person, but with sometimes just war movies, Taking Chance.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've seen that with Kevin Bacon.
Twice. Yeah.
What an incredible movie. Yeah, I didn't even expect that. I started tearing up. I was like, what the heck? Stop that.
Yeah. Well, because, honestly, that situation, people who have been.
Right. It's real. You
happens.
feel it, right? Because it's different. You've experienced an element of that.
Right.
Any war movie where you see the car pull up and the soldiers get out in uniform, it's, and those dog movies.
Yeah.
I wasn't even a dog handler, but I love dogs. And, watching those, it's like sometimes I'll feel more of a tear coming on than people I know that have passed.
Yeah.
I feel kind of fucked up.
Well, I mean, you had two things against you. One, you were in the
Yeah.
military, and two, you were in the infantry. And,
Right.
I know my son and I at the holidays sometimes will say things, and we're laughing, and people are looking at us like we're crazy.
Yeah, I get that all the time. I think people love me for that.
Yeah.
But sometimes I know it's not. It's inappropriate, my timing or whatever. And I can pretty much kind of like try to control it, but sometimes
You got to be you.
just, yeah.
You gotta
And
be
that's, I don't know. I guess I'd appreciate that more if someone was totally transparent, maybe a little not right about stuff sometimes or rude comments, but
Right.
at least you know what you're getting,
Right.
you know?
Yeah. There's no. Yeah. It's completely transparent.
Transparent,
You,
yeah.
You get what you get. So let's go back a little bit. You are. You report to your first duty station,
Correct.
and so you're the FNG, the fresh new guy.
Yes.
What's that like?
Oh, more yelling, more games, but it's all for a reason,
Right.
and I get it. And you know, let's just be honest. So like your military jobs that are no matter what branch in a combat role, they shouldn't have the luxurious barracks. They shouldn't have, you know, all the time off and no field ops, you know, that last for more than a week. You got to be used to all this stuff. So, yeah, it's definitely a fast tempo. Mm-hmm. So the way my unit worked was, I think it was basically a 1.5 year workup, a buildup of training, and then there's 2 years staggering, right? So in the infantry, you have essentially half your unit is older Marines. They've already been in for a couple years with a deployment under them. And then the next wave comes in, the senior guys get out, and that new seniority group is training up these younger Marines. So they become the squad leaders, the fire team leaders. And then your new wave of Marines, they fall in under all your riflemen, all your saw gunners typically. And then they train the young guys, and then the cycle continues. Right. So typically we would deploy to Okinawa, Japan. That was my first deployment. And then on that deployment, you get on ship and do some type of float. Well, I can back up a little bit if you'd like, but it's all, I'm sure it's kind of normal. You're painting the picture, and then you start to go ahead, you know.
Yeah, you're fine.
But yeah, so back to like the workup and getting into the fleet. Yeah, there's a lot of running up the mountains in your gas mask at 2 a.m. up a steep-ass hill and packing in a shower in the barracks, you know, a dozen Marines with full mop suits on, boots, charcoal coats, pants, and the hot showers are on, and you're, you know, singing cadence, doing jumping jacks and all these other crazy exercises. They're just breaking you off. Just pure games. But, man, I tell you, when we did deploy, even hard training, it made it seem not as bad. Right. And you hear that all the time. I would rather train much harder. And then, like, to the point, we've had a couple Marines die in training. You know, it sucks. But you have to train to that severity. And that's why I say a part of me, I think there's a place for hazing to a point. And you can define it how you want, but you can't train lightly and expect young men to go into combat.
Right, you have to train as you fight.
You do.
Yeah. And so I think that's the distinction between hazing
mm-hmm.
and hard training, right? Hazing to me is treating people poorly just to treat them poorly because that's how you got treated. Whereas hard training may seem like hazing to people, but there's a reason behind it. I'm doing this because of this. If you watched Band of Brothers, right? No one liked Captain Sobel. He was a dick, but he did those things, and those guys were ready for combat because of the things that he did.
You're very right, and I couldn't agree more. Some of it's improper usage of the term.
Yeah.
And I think we get that a lot with society, right? But yeah, so I would say people want to call it hazing, but it's just training hard.
Right.
And we should not reduce the intensity of training just because our quotas are lacking or this or that. I think it's very important to keep that tempo up.
Standards are standards.
Because we're just doing those guys that are actually in a total disservice.
Yeah, I agree.
You know.
So you're in Japan. This is, what year are you there then?
So 2001.
But this is before 9/11.
This is before 9/11. I think I was there for a couple months already.
Uh-huh.
And 9/11 hit. So I'm in the barracks. I believe I was sleeping at the time, and someone woke me up and said, man, come out and watch TV. So that's where I was. Now, we were supposed to get on ship, I think, 2 weeks later and do our float, which we would go to typically Indonesia. East Timor is where my senior guys went their last deployment, and that's where we ended up going. But the captain came in that morning and said, pack your shit. We're getting on ship early, and we're probably going towards Afghanistan. So we're all packing, getting ready. We get on ship early, and once we're about to, take off, we got word to head to Indonesia. It's like, okay. So we go there, and I didn't realize Indonesia is like 90% Muslim. So the thought was, we still go down there. The area is unstable. They were doing humanitarian ops, and that's what we did. But we wanted to be in the area because I thought, well, maybe there'll be some retaliation when we get into Afghanistan at various U.S. embassies, colleges. We might have to do like non-combatant evacuation operations for American citizens. So we're on standby for that. We did go in with a combat load to East Timor. And we ended up just doing, I think it was a few days of assisting like the Navy Seabees, building schools and churches, and basically just providing security.
Right.
We ported in Australia on the way there from Okinawa. And then when we came back, we stopped at Australia again. I think it was 2 or 3 days each way. I was a new guy, so I got blessed with guard duty, I think, on the way down. So I only got to, I think I had like a day, maybe less than that, to get off ship. But, yeah, it's all part of the fun experience, being a new guy. Now, my junior Marines in a combat deployment, they had to burn shit in a 50-gallon drum with diesel fuel.
Right.
So I think I got the better deal.
Yeah. So for anyone listening that's not been in the military, this is a thing. I know people hear about it and they don't believe it, but basically you put human waste, shit, in a big barrel, you pour diesel fuel on it, you light it, and then someone has to stand there and stir that.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the term shit detail came from, to be honest.
Absolutely.
With you. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just kind of ironic, but, burn this shit, burn this trash, and of course you're going to have health issues.
Right.
But where do you put that? I mean, you have to do something. So as humans, society, we can only, learn from things, and, maybe that's not such a good idea, as all these particulates we're breathing in probably are harmful.
Right. Right. And the thing is, I think when you look back on those things, when you look back at World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and now the Gulf War, we all did things at that time that we didn't know were going to be bad. So it wasn't like somebody sat in an office and was like, let's hurt these people. It's, oh, shoot, we hurt people and we didn't mean to.
Right.
And, so you're coming back from Okinawa, heading back to the States then? Or you're heading back to Okinawa?
Okay, so as far as being on ship. Yeah. Okay. So Okinawa, Australia, East Timor, Australia, back to Okinawa. I think our total ship time was like a month and a half.
Okay.
Maybe a month. Again, I was blessed to cross the equator, so I'm a shellback.
Oh.
And that was a surprise thing. I think the senior Marines talked about it, a little bit, but I didn't really, hearing a little bit about the stories of the whole process. 24 hours of fun.
Now I think that's hazing.
Yeah.
Just gonna be honest.
It's a lot of it's something to do, I think, to entertain people, take their minds off being in the cramped quarters. Yeah, so it's this whole King Neptune, whatever.
Crawl through garbage.
Crawl through garbage, fire hoses spraying on you,
Yeah.
crawl through the whole ship, the bathrooms. I mean, it's pretty gross, right? I mean, they're squirting water all over you, everything, crawling through muck But yeah, so it was an experience. I can say I'm a shellback. I know they have coins. I'll probably get a coin someday.
I'm kind of jealous because we did a North Atlantic cruise, but halfway through I got shipped off to computer school.
Oh, okay.
And so I got to do all the fun stuff except I didn't get to get my shell back.
Gotcha.
So 21 years in the military and I'm not a shellback. I'm ashamed to say it. I'm sitting across from a Marine that got to do it.
Hey, that's the thing, right? Everybody here's a different deployment, a different place someone went. I wish I could have done more.
Yeah.
I wish I could have done some different things, but that's life, right?
Yeah.
I'm thankful for what I did do, and I'm proud of what I did. I would probably say this, too. I didn't realize that the whole shellback thing, the equator, is not only practiced by the military, but also civilian vessels as well. It's kind of interesting fact. And for whatever I can't remember the history, how this started, but it's a thing that's known by a lot of people, and they've done it. But I'd say there's a lot of people that aren't aware this is even a thing.
Right.
And that's what's neat. And I think even just a podcast, I'll listen to them, and you learn so much from different people. And I like the variety. But as far as military goes, I could see people thinking about going in. Man, it's a good thing to hear these different points of views and little things that you might not hear in mainstream, like movies or things like that.
Right.
But it's nitty gritty of life in the military.
Right. And I think stuff like the shellback initiation or the blue nose or the Order of the Rock. I mean, there's 100 of them, right?
Yeah.
It just builds camaraderie and brotherhood and sisterhood.
It does.
It really does.
And I think it helps people on ship from killing each other, because I saw a few fights on ship, and what do you expect? You're cramped in these quarters. I think you were stacked
three high.
I think it might have been even 4.
It might have
in some
been.
areas.
Yeah.
So you have this little coffin of a sleeping space. You can't even sit up. And you lift the bottom of the mattress, and you have a little storage space, barely any, and maybe a stupid end like wall locker for every Marine's putting all their field gear. So yeah, very cramped. But what's funniest is you could imagine you go to port, right? You have a lot of Marines come back drunk, and then the ship takes off. Well, you have all these safety straps, right?
Yeah.
So guys, girls don't fall out. Well, I don't think anybody ever used those that I live by. And so, of course, we hit rough seas right away.
Yeah.
And in the middle of the night, you just hear thunk, 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 thunk. I was like, what the hell? Oh, all these Marines are falling off their racks. So, I'm like, oh, maybe I'll put my strap up.
Might be a good idea. I actually learned to sleep with my legs like shaped like a 4. So you didn't roll out of your rack.
That's impressive.
It's weird because I still sleep that way and my house never gets underway. So.
Yeah. Well, some habits they die hard or don't die.
They do.
And just like I'm sure you have the ability to sleep
anywhere.
I prefer not to ground anymore.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So, but if I sit on a chair more than an hour, it's kind of hard to stay awake because your body is so used to like, hey, we have some time for rack ops. Let's take advantage of this and get some shut-eye.
Yeah, you sleep when you can. That's no lie. So you finish up your deployment in Japan, and then you come back stateside.
We come back stateside. I think we had a couple weeks of leave. Got to go home.
So hold on, you're still dating your high school. Was she your high school sweetheart?
Yes.
Yeah. So you're still dating her.
Yes.
When all this is going on.
Yeah. You find someone that you connect with, and it was worth trying. So we did. And throughout, when I'd be out in California, she spent a lot of money on plane tickets, and I did too when I could, for even a 4-day weekend or whatever. So yeah, I get back. My senior Marines get out. We're now the senior guys.
Yeah.
I get pushed in. So I started off as a rifleman. Then I was a saw gunner. for most of my boot time. Then I get back and I'm a squad leader. So now I'm in charge of 12 Marines, 3 fire teams, sometimes attachments. You might get like a machine gun attachment or whatnot. So yeah, that was a good learning experience because, again, so a job interview, tell us about your leadership capabilities. Well, I supervised, trained, and cared for 12 Marines plus attachments. That's a pretty big responsibility, especially training then going into a combat environment.
Right.
And at the age of what would have been 22, I think.
Yeah. Well, think about this too. Like, you know, look at people in the military, and to your point, the amount of responsibility that you have in your 20s. And so when you do finally get out and you go to interview for a job, and they're like, wow, you're going to be in charge of 4 people, you know, can you handle that? You're like, are you freaking kidding me?
Right. Like, and just like, well, tell us about your work ethic. Or, well, I mean, I was trained to work until I die, basically, you know. I mean, hiking up this mountain or attacking this hill or whatever, you know, carrying a guy, it's like, how many times I felt my heart about to explode is, you know.
And I don't want this to go unnoticed either. I mean, as a saw gunner, you're humping that thing around.
Yeah, I don't even know. I don't even remember the weight of that thing, but, you know, a fully automatic small machine gun, basically. Each thing of rounds, you know, is 200 rounds, and those are heavy. So usually you'd have, you know, a raid pack or something to throw in a few extra drums. And then you get one on you, and you got an extra barrel, you know, because they get hot. Right. So, yeah, it's a lot of weight. And then so you figure not only in combat, but the training, it's, man, you got, I don't know, 50 to 100-pound pack, your weapon, all your rounds. Then we go on hikes from 10 to, I think our biggest one was like 26 or 27 miles, maybe pushing 30.
Yeah.
Up mountains. Camp Pendleton is very hilly. Yeah. I've ate shit a lot. A lot of Marines have. Yeah. Even boot camp, it's funny because you're so sleep deprived, and we all walked off the trail. Falling asleep while you're walking, I learned how to piss while I was walking. It's messy.
Yeah, but you got to do it.
All of a sudden, you'll be, you know, hiking up towards the end of boot camp and hiking up this mountain, and you'll see a guy, you know, you're kind of delirious yourself, and then you'll see a guy go and just fall down like this cliffside, like, oh, fuck.
So what happened?
Yeah.
Where'd he go?
And the coolest part about it, if anytime in the Marine Corps you fall out of a hike, you get the silver bullet.
Tell me about that.
Okay, that's a butt thermometer.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it looks, you know, like a Coors Light can. So that scared the shit out of me. So every time before a hike, I'd pound the Gatorade and order a pizza because I was like, I ain't going out like that.
No.
You walk by this poor fellow. He's got his pants down around his ankles, and the corpsman shoving a core thermometer up his butt. Right. And the whole unit's walking by him. Yeah. I mean, you talk about embarrassing.
Well, and there's a reason why they're shoving that thermometer up his butt, though, because they want to make sure he's okay.
I get that, but I mean,
I want people to understand we're not just putting thermometers in people's butts for no reason. There's a reason.
Right. Like, yeah, talk about hazing, you know.
Yeah, we're not doing that
for their own enjoyment.
Exactly.
So yeah, that was always a motivating factor for me.
Yeah,
to stay hydrated and to keep your salt consumption up and carb load and you know. Especially as a squad leader, we'd have guys fall out, and it's not about like, oh, I'm tough, but you know, yeah, we're all hurt, and especially as a leader, you have to push that down because a lot of times training, you feel like you're honestly breaking and falling apart and dying. I mean, and I talk about, you know, they refer to these hikes as humps. Okay, so on these humps, you know. It's great training for combat because you learn how to deal with pain, suffering, teamwork. I mean, so what this means, if you have a Marine starting to fall out and he's carrying a saw gun, as a leader, you need to take that saw gun and keep that Marine in the fight. So we take on their gear, their weapons, make it a little easier for them so they can continue. But as the leaders and other Marines taking on that gear, that sucks because
Right.
we're not doing fine. We're just manning up and doing what we got to do.
Oh, you're the example. You're setting the example for your junior
And I
folks.
think that's so important as a leader. You have to lead by example. We had some senior Marines that higher ups, first sergeants. Well, we had some that were very awesome, and when I was a senior Marine, we had some that were come from like the air wing, which I don't really understand. How you take someone from a non-combat unit and then you bring them to the infantry. I mean,
Well, and then put them in charge.
well, yeah, and for many aspects, right? Like
Yeah.
conditioning, just like a marathon runner. Like I ran one when I got out, and I remember, I could just go run 26.2 miles.
Right. Why not?
I could mentally, but your body has to be conditioned to deal with that, and during all that, strain and whatnot. So it's the same thing, when you're doing these hikes and humps, you got to mentally condition your body. And I would see these higher up Marines fall out, and it's just a slap. Like, and they weren't, from dehydration. It was just the mental toughness was not there.
Right.
So that's one thing I'd like to see maybe looked at. I don't know what the reasoning is, but that's not a good thing for your younger Marines to see.
No.
It weakens their morale to a point. If you have great leadership and they take care of you, we all know you're going to go above and beyond and do what you're asked to do because you believe in the mission, you believe in your leadership, and I carry that on in life to this day. I'm sure most of us vets do.
Right. Right. If you make sure people are fed and paid,
Mm-hmm.
and they know that even though whatever you're doing completely sucks, they know that you're there with them,
Right.
and that you're supporting them, they'll do anything you want them to do.
Well, and
Anything.
it's just like when I worked in Department of Corrections for 12 years. It's a shitty job and a thankless job, but you work with amazing people.
Right.
And because of that, having amazing coworkers for the most part, it makes your job okay. You can have the best job in the world. That's easy. But if you work with people that, they don't want to be there, they complain all the time, you get shitty leadership. It's just funny how that can be. Just like in the military, some of the best times of my life, some of the worst times. But when I look back at a whole, I don't regret it at all for the most part. And I look at it as a positive experience overall.
Right. Well, even the times that weren't great, you learned something. Sometimes
Right.
you learn how not to lead.
You do. And I think, again, that's a huge leadership characteristic, right? Because the best leaders can follow too. Mm-hmm. And just because, yourself, you know what you're doing, there may be a time where a younger person has a suggestion, and it's okay to hear them and take that. And if it's not a good idea, hey, thank you for sharing that, thought, but we're going to do it this way, and maybe explain it if there's time. Then you'll see leaders that take that suggestion. I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Because it was a good idea. And they might not know everything, but you have to be like that.
Oh yeah. Well, I read a book about leadership written by a Navy SEAL, and one of the things he said was, if someone comes up with an idea that's 70% of how you would have done it, let them run with it.
Yeah,
Because that 30% probably doesn't matter.
that's true.
As long as they're 70, 80% to what you want, you're going to get the desired outcome.
Yes.
It builds them as leaders too.
Absolutely, and gives them confidence and makes them feel part of the team and they're valued, all that stuff. I totally agree, and
Right.
I've never heard it put that way. But yeah, I used to listen to Jocko a lot, leadership, and I'd love it because a lot of the stuff you kind of know, but there's a lot of awesome points that like, oh, that's a good idea,
Yeah.
and then try to incorporate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that what he teaches in that is so very important that, you have to own the whole thing, but you also own it with the people that are around you.
Right. And I think it's so important in life, right? Like whether it's learning to be a leader, whether it's not making the same mistakes others have, we have to learn from each other. and you have to be open to that, because why make that same mistake? Someone has been through this before. Learn from them.
Right.
You know?
Well, and a lot of times that goes back to your kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
You want them to learn from the stupid stuff that you did,
right?
But sometimes they just don't. But I do want to go back though. So you're back, and now you're a leader in. I'm making the assumption here that you guys are getting ready to deploy somewhere.
Yeah. So we heard the scuttlebutt,
right?
The rumors, so called, in the military, and they can only tell us so much, but we're hearing the word, watching the news about the buildup of Iraq, possibly. So we already knew this was going to be a different workup, a different deployment. We were a helicopter company, golf company. So all of our methods of insertion and extraction, predominantly we utilize helicopters. CH-53, the big, huge helicopter, the CH-46, like the Chinook, the double rotor, and the Hueys. So between those, we'd rotate, various means of, rappelling sometimes, fast roping, spy rigging, and sometimes just laying the bird on the ground and jumping off real quick. So that's how we trained for our first deployment. Our combat deployment, we knew that was coming, was Amtracs, so the amphibious vehicles, which is, and I get, that's what we were going to use for the invasion, so we had to kind of shift. Fox Company and 2-5, they're a boat company, so that they primarily just trained with inserting from water.
Right.
Okay. So we all kind of had to shift this new transportation method and working with, the Amtrak crews and it gave us time to kind of get to know each other and see how we can work together in a combat role. And we lived on those things. Yeah.
Adapt and overcome.
Yeah.
Right?
So one of the big training things we did before deployment, we went to Victorville, California. Mm-hmm. It's an old Air Force base, or a portion of it is closed down. So it was a new thing that we went into these buildings, windows, doors, everything, and we got to break them and bust them, and full combat experience. It was the most realistic thing besides combat, because when we went there, we had, I forget, Miles gear suits.
Yeah,
the laser.
Uh-huh.
So, and it was well orchestrated. We had OP4, we had people dressed up as civilians. I remember there was news there, and they made it as realistic as possible. And then you have a casualty, you go through the whole thing, or sometimes someone makes a bad mistake, say they're exposing themselves, they're not taking cover. One of the trainers would walk by and just shoot your Miles gear. All right, he's dead. Now what? Okay, right. Fireman's carry, grab a litter, get them out while you're in a combat situation, you're being shot at, and man, it kind of, for a minute, you feel like it's real. Your adrenaline's going, all these different things we did. It's the conditioning, the muscle memory. So when it actually happens, and I know it's not all easy, but at least certain elements, y'all just fall into place, and things a well-oiled machine,
Right.
And it's so true. You don't even have to think. You just go into autopilot.
Right. And you have all these TTPs and all these different ways that you're going to fight. And generally speaking, none of that really survives the first shot, but you have a plan.
Right.
And then you can change that plan as you go along, but at least you're starting out with something.
Yes. And so true. And I mean, the fog of war is real, right? And whether that's a beach landing or in the dense vegetation of Vietnam or in the desert or an urban environment. And the interesting thing about Iraq is it's very diversified. Down south, you have a lot of just open oil fields, desert. You get a lot more vegetated as you push north. And actually north of Baghdad, it's actually, I felt like Vietnam, very lush. You have rivers. I was like, and that's where we got into our most severe firefight. And that was called the bridge at Taramiya in Iraq. So basically, what we did is we got to Kuwait and we stayed there for whatever it was,
14 days, or whatever it is,
a month
acclimation.
Oh yeah, well actually we were there for like a month plus, I think.
Good Lord.
Yeah, and that
well, you were at the beginning though.
We were at the beginning,
Yeah,
so basically we got to this camp and it had nothing.
Right.
We're living in fighting holes. Even when we got tents, that's all we really had. And we get to come into the tent and stay there for a couple of days and then go play fuck training games, which is good and intentional, and there's a reason, but go out, dig a defensive perimeter, and maybe see a camel way out in the distance with a camel herder.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was about it until we finally got word, it's go time. From that point forward, we went and staged just like Jarhead at the big berms by the oil rigs and waiting for that final word to cross over, and we did, and it was living out of an Amtrak, full mop, 4 gear, rubber boots, charcoal lined pants, top, gas mask, rubber gloves. You already have combat boots on, then you pull rubber gloves over that. Keep in mind these Amtraks are not air conditioned.
Right.
And we're cram-packed in there. So we're living on this Amtrak, whatever it was, a month. A lot of this, I don't have exact dates and durations.
Right.
Because it's a blur. It's not like on my deployment, I was just at a established camp with showers and all that. Time was just, it's hard to comprehend.
Well, and I don't want the point to be lost either. Like when we talk about mop gear, that is your chemical biological suit, and it's basically, it reminds me of the rubber suits that wrestlers would wear so that they could make weight. Only you're in the desert. It's 120, 130 degrees. You're inside this freaking vehicle that's like an easy bake oven. You have all this crap on. You're lucky that you remember that part of it,
right?
Let alone how long you were doing something.
And I would even add to that. So like the suit, it's kind of like maybe a Gore-Tex like suit, but it's charcoal lined. So it's not light. It's kind of crinkly and
it doesn't
bulky.
breathe.
It doesn't breathe. And then we had to tape around our seam with where our boots met our pants.
Yeah.
So and the hatch was buttoned up in the back of the Amtrak. I don't even remember the temperature. Obviously, there's times it was 100 out, and then inside that thing was well over 100. Yeah, so it was disgusting. I didn't take a shower. I think we didn't take a shower for over a month, month and a half. You can imagine the smells.
Right. I mean, fortunately, you got nose blind, right? So you didn't know.
I mean, we had to wear those suits, I think, the first few days.
Yeah.
And after that, like, we got to drop the gas mask and the gloves and the boots, and then we kind of just had to hang on to the suits. And then, but yeah, that was an experience, I would say. I mean, so combat loads in these Amtraks, overly packed with attachments and everything. I mean, we're crammed. And the way these seats are, I think it was a seat on each edge of the Amtrak, then there's a middle seat.
Right.
Just like some helicopters. So that idea is you're staggered, right? So you're sitting here, basically my knee goes in between your knees, and then it's like back and forth. So you're just crammed. And I remember guys were getting so pissed off at one point that, a couple of fights broke out. And it was funny because they were fighting like this. They couldn't even move their arms. They were like trying to headbeat each other, and here right next to them they got like AT4s and grenades, and it's like, dude, what are you doing? Just wait.
You're eventually going to get out of here. You can beat each other's asses then. Right?
Yeah. So sometimes comms is not working well,
right?
And sometimes the lid up top is buttoned down. So as far as like situational awareness, fog of war type stuff, it was tough,
And so you're convoying up into Iraq then?
We're convoying, yeah. So Regimental Combat Team 5, we were pretty much towards the tip of the spear. 1st Marine Division. So there was a lot of different branches, a lot of different units. I mean, I can imagine trying to coordinate this stuff. You guys got coming in, you know, parachuting in. You got all these armored vehicles coming in. You got ground troops. I mean, for the most part, we were all mechanized, but, you know, so yeah, we're essentially rolling up in a convoy of different aspects, you know, like I think we were kind of online as one big unit pushing forward for the most part. And then we got to highways, and there was times we'd all be, you know, 2 lines of military, just like you see in the movies, moving up one of Saddam's highways.
Yeah.
You know, then there's times you're more in dense vegetation, and then you get out on foot and whatnot. But it was a lot of pushing north, you know, punching out into a town or something, digging in for the night and a perimeter, and then the next day doing it all over. Sometimes we'd be in a spot for a day, sometimes it'd be a couple days, but that was our life for a few weeks.
Yeah.
And it was, living out of Amtrak. I mean, I remember one time we actually, I don't know who was the genius at playing this, but we were in a landfill, and that's where we dug in our defensive perimeter for the night. So I'm digging with my E-tool, which is a little, you know, shovel.
Fold-up shovel.
That is great. It's multi-purpose, right? You can dig a hole, your fighting position. You can bend the shovel over and use it for one butt cheek to take a dump.
Yeah.
It's a pickaxe. It's a shovel. So you dig your holes. While I'm digging in this trash, I'm seeing used needles. I'm seeing dead bodies. You know, it's stray dogs coming up to you. I remember the first couple of dead Iraqis I saw. They were on the ground. They looked like they were some part of a military unit. I think one had civilian clothes on, and the other had remnants of a Republican Guard uniform. But they were there for a couple of days, I think. Rigor mortis was set in. Well, these dogs, I look at these dogs, right, and they're playing out in the field with something like, what the heck? Well, it's got this guy's intestines, and he strung it out. This dog ran away and strung it out, playing with intestines, flopping up in the air probably 100 feet away.
Oh, my God.
And that was, I mean, besides funerals and whatnot, that was my, you know, first, like, experience. Seeing a dead body, like, it was kind of fucked up, kind of funny.
Right, well, yeah.
But I don't know. It's part of the experience, right? You're young. I walked up to these dead guys, and I just kicked them with my boot, like, you know. Yeah, so.
But that's what it is, though. I
mean,
what are you going to do?
It's
part
life.
Of you can't afford to look at it any differently. And quite honestly, afterwards, it's a lot easier to not look at it any differently.
So, yeah, it was a lot of pushing north, coordinating with other units, leapfrogging, sporadic firefights, pretty small for the most part. It's a lot of, like, pop shots. And, you know, this is another thing that's tough is conventional warfare, unit on unit, uniformed, vehicles identified. That's a different beast.
Right. This is asymmetric, and you don't.
This is asymmetric guerrilla warfare. These guys, you know, it's kind of like Saddam. Hey, you're going to stand your post, or I'm going to kill your family, or whatever kind of thing he had. A lot of these guys would abandon. You know, there's a lot of guys just giving up at first. Right. But then you get up further north, and there's guys, you know, that would pretty much strip their uniform off, be in civilian clothes, take a few pop shots, drop the weapon, walk away. And how do you combat that? And you got to be mindful. You can't just, you know,
can't just be shooting civilians.
Yeah, weapons free. You're not just shooting anybody.
Right.
Now, obviously, if they're a threat of any sort, child, a woman, a man, I mean, it's a different story. But it's very, you constantly are thinking and evaluating, you know, target, civilian. It's a tough thing to combat. And I think, you know, that was pretty much what we experienced until we got north of Baghdad. And I remember we were on the side of one of those highways, punched out, taking a break, whatever, eating chow, eating lunch. And I heard a lot of chatter on the radio, yelling and stuff. And first platoon went to reconnaissance a bridge crossing because we had to, I guess, punch over this river. And they got ambushed. Now, this was by a Syrian unit. And because we found out when we were withdrawing, looking at the IDs, they were all Syrians, and they were all dressed in black, full body pajamas. So kind of not what you expect fighting in Iraq,
Right.
at least as a young Marine. Now we reflect and we see what's all happened, and there's a lot of movement in the Middle East of different countries supporting ISIS and whatnot. But yeah, so we got the word first platoon got ambushed, and a few guys got shot and whatnot. One of the Amtraks took a RPG right in the driver's turret area, and I think he got out with injuries. But we get there, and again, it's just like the movies. We pull up in an armored vehicle, the hatch goes down. I was the first one out. I couldn't really see much. The fog of war is real, right? I knew first platoon was ambushed and under attack, but I couldn't hear nothing on the radio. It was just screaming pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish it was clear and concise like the movies, but a lot of times it's just chaos. And you talk about just things blowing up and smoke and people screaming, and the guys that were there on the ground, as soon as that hatch dropped, I run out, and I couldn't really tell where the enemy was, right? Because there's a building over here, guys are shooting in the bushes over here. So it's like a 3-dimensional 360, environment. It's not just this building we're taking fire from.
Yeah.
So first platoon, Timothy Tardif, he got shot. I don't remember all the details. Another guy, Gardner, got shot. Tardif was a squad leader at the time. This is a pretty cool story because there's a book written on it. It's called Marco Martinez is the author. It's called Hardcore, like Marine Corps, CORPS, From Gangster to Marine Hero. And he was actually involved in gangs growing up. But he ended up getting a Navy Cross, I think it was, for his actions that day. So his squad leader got shot, and another guy was shot, and they were taking fire from this 2-story building. Well, pretty much Marco Martinez, before we got there, assaulted this building. He had problems with his M16, was jamming. I think he threw that down, grabbed an AK off a dead guy he shot, stormed this building, got up, chucked a couple of grenades in this building, ran in, and shot everybody that was left. Suppressed that, took care of that building, so we could start getting a helicopter in, getting some of these guys casevaced, and yeah, pretty incredible. Yeah, I think he was the first Hispanic Marine or service member to be awarded the Navy Cross since Vietnam, if I'm correct.
Wow.
But this book he wrote, he was in my same unit. He was first platoon, I was second. So I found that even reading that book, I really got into reading military books because you can relate. And I think it wasn't right away, but maybe like 10 years after I got out, it was an element of it was soothing and it was relatable, and because you're not with these guys anymore.
Right.
So there's stories. But the cool thing about reading Marco Martinez's book is he talked about from when he first got in, which was when I got in, the same time, the same unit, and I refer to that as golf company. Again, he was first, I was second platoon. But it was a cool book to share with family and friends because it was like, this is a great depiction of my military time. I mean, I wasn't him, but as far as you can take a lot from the deployments and this and that, just military life.
Yeah, very similar paths.
But yeah, so that whole thing happened. Yeah, we unloaded on some buildings and some guys in the woods, and one of my guys in my squad, he took just a small portion of shrapnel from a pineapple grenade. Another guy in my squad, he took out that guy. He was like hiding in a little ravine, like a ditch. We get back to camp finally, and or that night where we stayed in fighting holes, and the guy that took shrapnel it was just above his kneecap. The doc had one of those big cotton swabs, and he actually could push it all the way through one hole and through the other hole, and he just cleaned. I'm like, oh, that's kind of weird,
Yeah.
But yeah, so that whole firefight happened. thankfully, it could have been much worse. And thankfully to Marco Martinez doing what he did, we got there and pretty much helped clean up what was left. And then it was like, okay, grab IDs, grab whatever you can, so pat down these enemies and get whatever intel we can get, and let's get out. So they got the helicopters in. As soon as the helicopters were flying out, we started withdrawal. And as we started withdrawal, I'm looking out top of the Amtrak, looking back, and just seeing shit on fire. And like I say, lush vegetation. I'm in a Vietnam movie. It's what it felt like. Right. I was in a movie.
Yeah.
And then we saw these fast movers coming in, and they just bombed the fuck out of this area. And then probably a mile down the road, our whole convoy is leaving real fast, right? All of a sudden, coming towards us, we see all these black Humvees. Non-uniformed guys like pass us. Oh, they're going to get some intel, whatever. But I thought, oh, that's cool, Delta or something, yeah. Navy SEALs, I don't know.
Some special operations.
Yeah, so nice. I tell you, that the adrenaline dump, that was...
Yeah, because you're probably pretty spun up for quite a while.
Oh, yeah, and then finally, like, one big real firefight. Yeah, so I think at that time we had a little, like, half-ass compound outside of Baghdad, so we get back there, and, some of our leaders, again, good leadership, they managed to get some, like, third world whiskey from civilians, and we all, did a cheers to a shot or two and kind of wrapped the night up there, had some chow, and yeah, like I say, a firefight, but, we were in and out within a few hours, and, you hear about these battles that go on for days and tons of guys killed, and it's just, you can measure your experience to others, but at the end of the day, I'm just proud of what I did and what guys did with me, and at the end of the day, you do it for them.
Right.
You do it for the one serving on your left and right. And so what I would say with that, I talked to a few guys over the years, right? And when I was working in the prison, I had some health stuff happen, and long story short, went out by ambulance from a anxiety attack, which I've never had to that extent. Thought I was having a heart attack. And I did some reflection. And this happened, I think, less than a week after my dad passed, unexpectedly a couple years ago. So I did a lot of reflection, and I knew right away I had to get out of that job. I think my life, I was exposed to a lot of death, destruction, and negative aspects of humanity. Mm-hmm. And I knew for my own good, for my mental health, for my body, for my family, as much as I liked that job, I was working a lot. I was a recreation director. I started as an officer, and then I took a job as like the recreational director that, would set up their athletic stuff. And
yep. Well, I want to set this up for people listening, right? Because it sort of did a big jump.
Sure.
And so you did your deployment and you came home after. So how long were you there in Iraq?
In Iraq, I think it was under a year. I think it was like 9 months.
Okay.
What I was just getting to real quick is this bond you form. When I did this reflection, if I would have stayed working for the state, I wouldn't probably took time and reconnected with these buddies. But since this all happened, we've since done 2 reunion trips, one to Texas, kind of went hog hunting, a lot of just, drinking, hanging out, and reconnecting. And I tell you, you go 20 years with not seeing guys, but they're your brothers. You've been in the shit together. The biggest, strongest bonds are forged in diversity, I think, in negative times. Mm-hmm. People's real intentions and character, you don't really see them in the good times, right? It's the adversity. I feel like that's when the bonds really happen. So yeah, we hang out, and it's just like, just like yesterday.
Yeah, that isn't that the funny thing though. Like
Yeah.
you sit down with your buddies,
Yeah.
and it's. I experienced this a couple weeks ago. I went to an event, and there was a handful of guys that I had deployed with, but I haven't seen them since 2007, and it was like nothing had changed.
Yeah.
We all looked older.
You're right. Yeah.
But nothing had really changed. And I want to go back to something you said too. You talked about how those bonds are forged in adversity, and one of the things I learned in combat was that you don't build character there, you reveal character.
Absolutely.
There's a huge difference between those two things, and I think this is exactly what you were saying. I knew who these people were because of what happened.
Yeah, so I would go back to, like, okay, even in training, our platoon guide, right? Big, strong guy, all-state wrestler, whatever. Yeah, he was a PT stud. He was awesome. He could yell. He was a great leader. That was awesome in the garrison. We moved up north and started doing stuff in the field. He started to slowly slip. Lack of sleep, lack of nutrition, all these big muscles aren't getting enough protein. You'll see little guys rise and can handle this, right?
Right.
It's not the biggest, toughest guys, and you always hear that. I mean, you might see this guy that's always got the polished boots, a squared away press uniform. We're in an infantry, and there's a time for that. I get it, but we should not concentrate on that. We don't need wall locker inspections. We need to be in the field, crafting our skill.
Right.
And, it is interesting because whether in training or combat, you'll think, oh, this guy's locked on. He's going to be there. Not saying they go AWOL and leave a firefight. I'm just saying their mental toughness, their will to push forward. You can't judge it.
No.
Just how they look,
No, and that's an interesting thing too, because I find that the guys who are the biggest challenges in garrison,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Right, are the guys you want in combat.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And that was a funny thing I was going to add to as well, is that you see these guys that weren't anything special. They'd show up to formation, fucked up camis or unpolished boots, and whatever. They're just kind of a fuck up. Maybe they drink too much, but geez, oh Pete's. They're a hell, when shit hits the fan. It's like, wow, dude, that kind of surprised me, but
that's the dude you want next to you.
Yeah, like
right?
hell yeah,
Right. We used to say you can't polish a turd,
You can make it glisten sometimes, but it's still a turd.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be able to count on this guy in garrison. He's going to get you in trouble every time.
Right.
But not when you're in combat.
Right.
And that's important because you don't just dump people off because of how they act in garrison. You really have to kind of look at that whole person.
You do, and you can't give up on anybody. Right. You got to keep working on them. And we all had an experience, I think, where, hey, there's kind of this turd, and guess what, bud? You're in charge of this guy. Oh, thank you, But a lot of these guys can be turned around, You show them you care, and sometimes they're a lost cause, and that, you try to save the ones you can, or, whether it's remotivating them, taking some extra time to train them on a weapon system. Some guys need a little more attention.
Well, and I think those lessons translate into your civilian life as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? So you served 4 years then total in the Marine Corps?
4 years active duty.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then did you come back to Michigan when you got out?
Yeah. So, my wife and I rented a U-Haul truck and a car trailer, and we drove back home.
Any kids at this point?
No.
Okay.
Nope.
Right. So it's just you and her. Aren't those like the most beautiful times though? Like when
they
you
are.
Think about that early part of your marriage. And I love my kids, but you think about the time. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think every chapter in life you have to embrace it and enjoy it. And just like when kids are young, life's so busy, go, go, go. And now, my kids are getting older, one out of high school, one on her way towards the end, on her way out. And, I just try to embrace each chapter.
Yeah.
Because it changes. And I know it'll be another chapter when they're out, and,
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
yeah,
but
so I didn't mean to interrupt your chain of thought, but so you rent this U-Haul trailer and you head back home.
Yeah, so that was a fun experience because on the way out to California, we thought, let's go south. cut through the panhandle of Texas and Oklahoma, stopped at some things. We stopped by the old Oklahoma monument for the bombing in there, and stopped by the Grand Canyon. That was pretty cool. It was actually snowing when we stopped.
Wow.
Yeah. I didn't really envision that when I, see the Grand Canyon for my first time. Stopped a few places, made it a nice few-day trip. Wasn't trying to kill myself. Going through some of those plain states, flat, it's boring, and I feel a lot of appreciation for semi-truck drivers. Going through them states, Nebraska, Iowa, winds picking up and hitting. It's just like, wow, it's a constant battle trying to stay in your lane. So then when we came home, we went through the northern route and hit like Utah, Colorado, Las Vegas, kind of shot over that way. Why not see some of the country, right?
Yeah.
Most people, I don't think, take a cross-country trip. I mean, maybe to a point, but let's make the most of it. Check some stuff out, take a few days each way. And, we came back home and started life back home. Like I said, I've lived throughout mid-Michigan. I did commercial construction when I first got out for about 5 years. And it was a good job. I had a pension, but it takes a toll on your body. And my body's been through a lot, especially mainly because of the Marine Corps. No regrets.
Right.
But how do you expect it not? It's a lot of weight, a lot of pounding, on your knees, on your back. I thought, geez. And here I am pouring concrete and jackhammering. I wake up in the morning, I can't even stand up, or my hands are locked up. Like, I got to look at something different. So I wanted to break from that military structure and wearing a uniform and all that. And like, wow, the state's hiring, COs. So I applied, interviewed. Then they put a pause on hiring. So about 2 years later, I get a call, and then I transitioned to the state as a corrections officer. Tough job, thankless job.
Yeah.
I was proud of what I did, though. I try to work hard and do my best at everything I did. I was on the emergency response team, which is like their SWAT team. I did that for a few years. Best training they have. It was fun.
Yeah.
I helped with a security threat group, STG group for like gangs and stuff. And I volunteered and did a lot of stuff. I helped Special Olympics. I raised thousands of dollars. I was selected to run on the whole, it's called the Central Route for Special Olympics in Michigan. So what they do, and I know a lot of people are kind of aware of these runs and polar plunges.
Yeah.
I've done the polar plunge a couple times too. That was fun. Honestly, when you jump in ice cold water, it just burns.
Yeah.
It's not even cold for a while. All a good cause, but it's kind of neat because you get 3 big RVs, right? State police make up an RV, Department of Corrections make up an RV, and then local law enforcement. So basically, however each department wants to select their people, they select people from throughout their department, and they make this team. So going back to the military, I didn't know any of these people. I was thrown on an RV, and we're driving from Lansing, Michigan, up to Copper Harbor, right? And then so you get on this RV with people you don't know, and you're just living with them.
Good luck.
Yeah, and I did fine.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's awkward a little bit, but you just, if it's something you've done, I mean, it wasn't that hard for me. So it was pretty cool. Before the run, I raised, like I say, through selling T-shirts and whatnot and different raffle tickets we did. I think personally I raised like $5,000 or $6,000 for Special Olympics. Then going on this route raises money, and you have all these small community runs during the same run week. So whether it's like Mount Pleasant, Lansing, Jackson, wherever, Traverse City, they'll have these community runs. It's like, I don't know, a few mile run, 5K. And, you get a T-shirt, you go do it. It's not timed. You just run together as a unit. Usually local cops come in or firefighters, and they have a flag, and if a few of those we timed, right? So as we're running across state from Calumet all the way down to Detroit to Belle Isle, raising awareness, we're carrying the torch the whole time. So the setup of these RVs is they leapfrog each other. So whatever, we had like 8 people on each RV. You rotate through the RV running, and that's like, what, 4 or 5 hours of running that RV. Then the next RV that just got done, they'll pass forward and they'll go stay at a hotel for like 4 or 5 hours. Not a whole night's sleep.
You're right.
Just enough to take a shower, lay in the bed, and then you're getting up and you're going to meet to do your next run. So we did that for a week straight. Made it all the way down to Belle Isle. So, yeah, I did that with the department. I feel like I did a lot. Did a lot of good, a lot of fundraisers for staff members going through tough times. Yeah, I mean, I made the most of it. Like I said, it's a more of a thankless job, but I was proud of what I did and the time I had. I just knew it's time to make a change, and, you know, I'm not really in that line of work anymore. I occasionally do a little side work, construction stuff, but kind of just still on my journey, trying to figure out what's next.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I hear you. So I want to talk a little bit about your family, if that's okay.
Sure.
You have 2 daughters then?
I have 1 son and 1 daughter.
Oh, 1 son and 1 daughter. All right. So tell me some things. So is your son your oldest?
He's my oldest. Yep. Okay. He's 2 years older than my daughter.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about him.
He's amazing. He's amazing. He's going to local college right now. He kind of switched his mind on, a major, which we all do.
He's a kid.
He's a kid. And, yeah, so we'll see what he decides to do. And, my daughter's very smart. She's going to do something amazing. I don't know what yet, whatever profession she gets into.
Yeah. What about your wife? When you think about her, what's something that pops into your head?
Oh, she's been a rock my whole life. Yeah. We've been through, I feel like, the gauntlet together. If you can survive a long-term relationship, a combat deployment, or a couple deployments, obviously we all go through stuff through the years, ourselves, each other, family, sickness, death. Yeah, she's an amazing woman, and happily married.
That's great. And how long have you been married?
Got married in 2002, and it's
23 years.
Yeah,
just about. Yeah,
yeah.
That's not nothing. That's for
no,
sure.
Absolutely. And again, I go back to this. Yeah, I got married younger and had kids younger, but I grew up fast.
Right.
A lot of things are put in perspective, and I'm thankful for that.
Yeah.
I always thought it'd be cool too to not be 60 years old trying to throw a football with my little kid.
Yeah.
And having some energy and physical ability left in me when the kids are gone to still do some stuff and travel.
Right.
So now on the flip side, I always wanted to serve just a 4-year contract, do my service, and then move on to something different. And having a family in the military never appealed to me.
Right.
I know it's tough, right? It's tough on everybody. The kids, I think, it's the toughest on getting pulled up and uprooted every few years. So we decided, I never wanted to make a career out of it, so that was easy.
Right.
But that was kind of my thought,
Yeah. Yeah. And so if you want to, I want to talk a little bit about your exiting the
sure.
Department of Corrections. So you talked about this a little bit earlier, and I kind of sidetracked you because I kind of wanted to get the whole story.
Mm-hmm.
So you were at work and you had a panic attack, basically, or
yeah. So obviously, there's elements of the military to this day of serving that you live with, right?
Right.
And I'm fine with that. I think it's a combination of long-term exposure to tough work, and then lose my dad, and then I was the only one that did my job. Yeah, I could have took a whole week off or whatever, but I came back a couple days after, and it was too soon, but here I am. I'm trying to keep up in my job. That's my work ethic, right?
Yeah.
I knew I needed to get there because things would fall apart. And I was working overtime as an officer still. So I would typically do like 12-hour days. I wasn't doing a full 16, which a lot of officers do, and that's tough life. A lot of times it's not your option. You do your 8, and then you're going to get mandoed a lot of times for another 8. Fast-paced working tempo. Sometimes you get exhausted, and I think it was a combination of a lot of things. But a lot of stress, and never had it something so severe, but I knew, and I mean, it doesn't really matter, I guess, the details, but I got out to the parking lot. I try to do it discreetly, right? I could have tried to walk up and got through the main gate, and maybe something happened. I could have called and asked for an ambulance, but I called and asked if maintenance would come get me in one of their gators and just take me through the Sally Port, and I was going to hopefully be fine and go home and just take another couple days, right? I didn't want the attention. I didn't want a big deal. So I get to my truck, and my heart is pounding. I'm waiting for it to explode out of my chest. My head is pounding. I'm like, am I having a stroke? Am I having a heart attack? This isn't good. And I pretty much knew it was either that's about to happen or a stroke. Right. So I took a couple minutes, put the window down, try to gain my composure or whatever, and I drove maybe a block. And the state police post in Jackson is right by the prison, so I thought, well, I'm going to pull over here. My first thought is I don't want to hurt anybody in case something happens medically. And obviously I care to live. So I pull over, call my wife. I'm like, hey, I'm feeling this way. This is where I'm at. I think I need to go to the hospital. She's like, I'm calling 911. So she's checking out at Dick's Sporting Goods, buying something for the kids. And I felt so bad as I hear these details, she's like getting this phone call, but called 911 and ambulance came and got me. And that's when, I'm in the ER and machine's going off for hours and just waiting. Like, I tell my wife, she's like, do you want me to go? I said, I would, if I'm sorry to do this, but I got to try to settle down because I couldn't help it. And I'm looking up at the ceiling, and her dad has passed, my dad has passed, and I kind of, made a deal with them. I'm going to make some changes in my life. And it was not foreseen at all, but that's life, right? Life is what happens when you're making plans.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's kind of crazy, but 2 of the guys I used to work with in the prison, they started a little construction company, their own stories, right?
Yeah.
And my one buddy was hounding me, hey, come work with us a little bit. So every once in a while, I'll help them build a deck or something, and man, they were both in the Marine Corps too. 2 Marines that both worked in corrections. Sometimes that brotherhood doesn't die, know. So I feel like I'm in a pretty good place right now. And, you just make the most of what you're dealt.
Yeah. Well, you have to do what you have to do to take care of yourself and your family.
Absolutely. And that's number one.
Yeah.
That is number one.
Yeah.
And I felt like I did that, and I'm going to continue to do that. And that's why I'm here today. I saw an episode on the local news channel, and I had no idea. And I thought, what a great gift, right? Mm-hmm. Something to give your family, maybe maybe someone can learn something that listens to this. Maybe not. Maybe they'll think I'm an idiot. I don't know.
Well, I've lived long enough to know that some people are going to think I'm an idiot, and some people.
Yeah, and it really doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't.
Because I feel like if you can put out some good in the world, that's my main mission.
Right.
I mean, you can call it a sheepdog, you can call it a caring person, whatever. But I feel my cup is full when I help other people. And So,
Well, that's why we do what we do.
and I get it, and I think it's an amazing thing. And maybe when you're ready to give this up, I'd be interested.
Well, I turn 60 next month, so maybe we should talk. There's a lot of work going on here.
I'm sure.
Well, it's been great talking with you, Brad. It's been great getting to know you and really learn about your life. This is the part that I get something out of.
Sure.
Is talking with other veterans. Before we go, I got to ask the one question though that I ask everyone. So when someone's listening to this story years from now, and you and I aren't here on this planet, what message do you want for them to take from your life?
Well, I'd probably say ultimately again, put out good in this world, and not that you'll expect it back, but surround yourself with good people and people that will push you to be your best. And I think things fall into place. In general, I'd say that's how I kind of view life. And what I would suggest, if you go looking for a fight or you go looking for something, you're going to find it. You look for confrontation. You look for an argument. What do you expect?
Right.
So that's probably what I'd pass on.
Okay. Well, thanks for taking the time out on a Sunday to sit here and talk with me.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Watching the story of one of our nation's heroes on Veterans Archives, where your story matters. We are dedicated to preserving these stories for future generations.